because we have to be very honest about this. We know, of course, that if our white brothers and sisters were so socially neglected and economically abandoned and were going to prison at that level, it would be a national emergency. There'd be conferences every week. There'd be TV shows twice a week. 1 out of 3 of all young black men are on probation, parole, or in prison. Can you imagine that? 33% of all white brothers. Maybe some of the sons of congressmen and women would be there. Oh, then it's a major issue. But no, on the chocolate side of town, you just act as if that's normal. But then we got the class question that we got to deal with. Because the black middle class and upper middle class brothers and sisters were going to jail at the same rate that our precious black poor brothers and sisters were going to jail. We'd have different kind of black leadership. Different kind of black leadership. I mean, I love my Jack and Jill brothers and sisters, but if major portions of Jack and Jill were going to jail, oh Lord, then you get Ivy League folk on fire. I got to deal with the prison industrial complex. And I say, as a Christian, every life has the same value. I don't care what class, what economic status, I don't even care what color. You're a Christian. Everybody's made in the image of God. We want to have the same level of concern and the same level of care. But when we don't, we have to be reminded critically. What else about Finland? Finland also ensures that only 3% of their children live in poverty. Because when you talk about schools and achievement gaps, yes, teachers must be accountable. Yes, students must be responsible. Yes, administrators ought to be visionary. But if you're coming out of a context of such deep abandonment and neglect, by the time you get to school, your stomach's empty. Worried about the bullets you heard last night. You hear the cries from upstairs and downstairs, and you try to walk across your hood and see all of the entrepreneurial activity on the corner. And what's fascinating is, in the United States, children of the well-to-do, and they're precious too, all children are precious, no matter who. The children of the well-to-do do exactly the same as all the children in Finland. Which means that America is #1 in education when it comes to well-to-do children. Why is that? Because the well-to-do children go to schools and prep schools and special kinds of schools that are just like the Finland schools. They're small. Teachers are intense. The parents are involved. The students are told every day they're brilliant. It's only when you introduce poverty that the achievement gaps escalate. And we have a recent study that is just not black-white, it's rich-poor. And so even as we talk concretely about the various kinds of solutions within schools, with the stress and wonderful essays that I read on the wall that Brother Mark was pointing out, wonderful grammar, clear presentation, subject matter, who are your favorite black figures, freedom fighters, and so forth, you see. That the larger context is a context that we cannot ignore. And therefore, for me, any serious talk about wrestling with the love deficit has to do with our individual relation to the precious children. And it has to do with what we could call institutional love. Because if you leave children dangling generation after generation after generation, they get the point. They know they're not loved. They know they're not a major priority. And they know that very few persons are listening to their voices. There's 12,000 lobbyists on K Street in Washington, D.C. How many of those lobbyists are lobbying for children? One main lobbyist. Mary Wright Evans, Children's Defense Fund. Give Sister Mary a hand. She's been at it for 40 years. She comes right out of the movement of Fannie Lou Hamer, Martin Luther King Jr., Stokely Carmichael, and the others. She said, I'm going to keep this fight alive, talking about poverty, because you know, Martin King was shot doing what? Organizing poor people. Critical of the war in Vietnam. And when Martin King was shot, 72% of Americans disapproved of him, and 55% of black people disapproved of him. Everybody claims as if they love Martin. Now that his body is in the grave. No, when he was around, especially talking about the relation of poverty and education, he was very unpopular. I was just in Buffalo just the other day, and they were telling me, Brother West, we recall when Martin was here that there was an auditorium of 2,000 and only 600 people showed up. I said, what do you mean? Oh, they organized against them. They even had local black pastors in churches organizing against Martin. Young folk need to know that. Because we associate success and popularity rather than greatness and integrity. They're not always the same. I love about Bishop Kenneth Moore's senior and junior. The eyes on the cross. It's not about popularity. It's about spiritual integrity, moral consistency, being anchored in a gospel that says that you will be empowered as you speak the truth, and at the very moment where it looks like you're about to collapse, in comes a power that lifts you up. But that's the kind of leadership we need in talking about education. That's the kind of leadership we need in talking about the achievement gap. That's the kind of leadership we need in talking about the love deficit. And the implications for the country and the world are grand, because what has made America democratic and free has been primarily the black prophetic tradition that said, you say you're a democracy, but you got slavery. You say you're a free society, but you got Jim Crow and Jane Crow. You say you're a society of liberty, but we see you still got residential racial segregation. You still got educational segregation, and you still don't respect black people enough. I'm not talking about cosmetic tolerance. I'm talking about respect. We heard it among these magnificent young people from Mount Airy. Weren't they powerful? Oh, there was some truth. There was some deep truth that came through. And what they were talking about in the end was respect. Of course, it has to begin at home. Black people don't respect each other. And it's going to be very clear that other folks are not going to respect us. By respect, it doesn't mean accept everything. Some people think, wait, you respect me, but you just criticize me. That's right. I love you. But when you love folk, you protect them, you respect them, and you correct them. All three. And they're intertwined. And if we really love our young people, we have conferences just like this. They have a variety of voices and tell each and every one of them, we want to protect them, we want to respect them, and we want to correct them. And we want to connect them to the best of their history. And the best of their history makes not just them and the black community better, it makes American democracy better. And in the end, it makes the world better, because the world has to take note of a people who, in the face of hatred, could still generate a love supreme like John Coltrane. And the hate, in the face of profound bigotry, can produce love and the need of love of a young genius at the age of 25 called Stevie Wonder. You heard it the other night. That song written 40 years ago still has power. It's not bubble gum like it cuts to the bone. That's the tradition that we're talking about. That's the kind of spiritual leadership we need to have that builds on that kind of power and at the same time tries to tell the truth always in the spirit of love. Because if love is not at the center of it, y'all, it's just sounding brass and tinkling cymbals. Thank you all so very much.